Japan has expelled some tourists and banned access to certain places for foreigners. But why? What are these foreigners doing there? Imagine that Japan has always been perceived as an almost magical place, filled with traditions, temples, and that unique blend of ancient and modern. However, over the past few decades, this combination has become a real magnet for tourists from around the world. The country has quickly risen to the top of the most sought-after destinations. Everyone dreams of discovering the temples of Kyoto, the tech districts of Tokyo, and of course, experiencing that unique touch of a culture so different from their own. But like anything good taken to excess, this tourism boom has started to cause problems for the Japanese themselves. The increasing presence of visitors has disrupted the routine of once very quiet places like Kyoto, where locals value a peaceful and respectful life. Suddenly, this community space has found itself invaded by cameras, noisy tourists speaking loudly, blocking narrow streets, and treating every corner of the neighborhood as a photographic backdrop. Tokyo also suffers, to some extent, from this invasion in the most touristic areas. The growing number of people walking the streets and crowding the attractions has become a real challenge for local infrastructure. One might say that Japan has opened its doors to the world, but now it faces the delicate task of preserving the quality of life of its inhabitants, people who are generally very reserved and deeply attached to order and respect for communal spaces. Tourism in Japan has exploded to such an extent that in some regions, it is practically impossible to ignore its impact. The country, once famous for its serenity and respect for shared spaces, now has to deal with crowds that do not always share the same values or the same sense of sensitivity. Instead of discreet travelers exploring places with consideration, there are often waves of visitors who, sometimes inadvertently or simply out of lack of etiquette, disrupt and complicate the lives of local residents. Imagine a neighborhood in Kyoto where every detail has been carefully designed to preserve the ancient and sacred atmosphere of the place. These spaces, once refuges from the hustle and bustle of daily life, have become popular tourist spots. One now sees a constant flow of visitors, cameras in hand, looking to capture every corner and wandering in large groups. The neighborhood's pace of life has been transformed in a way that no one had anticipated. The truth is that Japan was never really prepared to become a mass tourism destination. The Japanese mindset values welcoming visitors, but within a much more intimate and tranquil context. With the sudden tourism boom, the country is now forced to rethink its strategies for managing the coexistence between Japanese people and foreigners. But why does this wave of uncontrolled tourism cause so many problems for Japan? In Japan, there are many implicit codes of conduct that embody respect for the community and public spaces. However, these rules are not always obvious to foreign visitors. Take, for example, the issue of noise. In Japan, people speak quietly, especially in public transport and residential areas. It is not a strict law, but a widely accepted consensus. Thus, when tourists speak loudly or cause other noise disturbances, it is perceived as a form of noise pollution by the Japanese, who are accustomed to a much calmer and more harmonious environment. There have already been cases where people encountered problems because of this type of behavior, and some Japanese people have shown great anger towards ill-mannered tourists who speak loudly or openly argue in public transportation. Personally, I find it very disrespectful, but I'll leave it up to you to judge. Another particularly sensitive point concerns temples and shrines. These places hold immense spiritual and cultural importance, and many etiquette rules must be followed, from how to behave when entering to where it is permissible to take photos. The Japanese take this culture very seriously, and as a good tourist, the least one can do is respect these rules and act accordingly. However, this is not always the case. Many visitors disregard these boundaries, whether by entering areas that should be preserved or taking photos where it is prohibited. Some notable incidents illustrate this lack of respect. such as the case of a 17-year-old boy who vandalized a sacred temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, by scratching his name on a wall with his nails. It is simply incomprehensible. Of course, he was arrested by the police, but unfortunately, these cases are not isolated. They reflect a broader trend. There are also behaviors that may seem trivial, but hold great significance for the Japanese. For example, eating while walking is frowned upon in certain regions, especially in historical districts. It's not just the act of eating while moving, but often this behavior is accompanied by leaving trash on the streets. Throwing waste outside designated areas or not sorting it correctly is highly frowned upon in Japan and goes against their culture of respecting public spaces. I know this might seem trivial to most tourists, but this kind of behavior is perceived as a great lack of respect by many Japanese people. Throwing trash on the streets, disrespecting temples, making noise even late at night in public places. All of this further tarnishes the image of tourists, which is already far from positive in Japan. If you want a concrete example of the negative impact of tourism, look at what is happening in the geisha districts of Kyoto. These iconic places, known for the presence of artists preserving Japanese cultural traditions, are regularly invaded by disrespectful tourists. Instead of respecting their work and space, many see them as tourist attractions, taking photos without permission, blocking the streets, and disturbing their activities. This kind of behavior is outrageous. Imagine this scene. A tourist insists on taking a photo of a Japanese woman who is visibly uncomfortable, trying to avoid the camera. Despite this, the tourist persists as if it didn't matter at all. How can one act like that and think it's acceptable? Let's be clear, these are not tourist attractions. They don't dress that way to attract tourists. So please don't treat people in the streets as if they are part of a spectacle. It's especially important to emphasize that in Japan, people are generally very open-minded when it comes to alternative fashion. It is common to come across people dressed in unique ways, doing cosplay, or adopting very particular styles, and that is not a problem at all. No one judges, no one points fingers. People respect individuality and focus on their own lives. Those who dress differently do it primarily for themselves. They are not trying to attract attention, so stop interrupting them on the street or constantly taking photos, especially without asking for permission. It's a fundamental matter of respect. Now, let's go back to the issue of the geishas. Imagine the impact of hundreds of people following them or constantly stopping them to take photos. This, besides being intrusive, turns something that is an integral part of the culture into a mere tourist attraction, stripping away the respect these women embody. As more and more tourists arrive in Japan, these small acts of disrespect add up, and this could well change how the Japanese perceive visitors. It creates a major problem for all tourists, and even if you are a respectful visitor who doesn't make these mistakes, you could still be perceived negatively just because you are a foreigner. Unfortunately, this phenomenon occurs in many countries, not just in Japan. Currently, the Japanese government is taking very serious measures to try to control the excesses of tourism and better protect daily life and local culture. To begin with, one of the most visible initiatives is the awareness and signage campaigns. Here's what I mean. In many tourist sites, the government installs signs in several languages with very clear messages such as, "Please be quiet," "Do not take photos without permission," and "Respect others' space." These might seem like simple requests, but these reminders greatly help tourists understand that their behavior needs to be adapted, often quite differently from what they are used to in their home countries. Moreover, in Kyoto and other more traditional places, the government has implemented access restrictions. They even block entry to certain areas and impose fines on those who do not follow the rules. One highly publicized case in Japan is that of Johnny Somali, who was arrested for causing serious issues among the Japanese population. Not just minor infractions, but serious enough to get him apprehended. He was released later and recently found himself at the center of a controversy involving South Korea. Here's a quick summary of the story. Johnny Somali began his journey in Japan by live streaming videos focused on interacting with his surroundings. He used a speaker to broadcast messages sent through the live stream chat. The problem was that these messages were often extremely offensive and inappropriate. He openly mocked serious subjects, thinking it was funny and considering himself the king of humor, while being in Japan, a country that values silence and respect for public space. His behavior quickly became unbearable for the Japanese. He even broadcast loud noises and inappropriate music in crowded metros and other busy places. Personally, it makes me angry because he thought that being American allowed him to do whatever he wanted. He constantly said provocative things, and his mockery became even more extreme when he addressed sensitive topics like historical tragedies, making fun of painful events for the Japanese. Instead of withdrawing or apologizing, he persisted in his provocations, attracting the anger of Japanese people who recognized him and condemned his behavior. The situation escalated to the point where he was confronted by pedestrians and even former Yakuza members. In one of the most intense moments, he was forced to make a public apology on his knees, surrounded by people furious with him. However, if you think that had any effect, think again. He didn't stop. After being banned from his streaming platform, he continued broadcasting on another one with the same provocative content. Eventually, Johnny Somali was arrested for trespassing and indecent behavior after an incident where he disrupted workers at a construction site, shouting provocative phrases out loud, including references to disasters and tragic events in Japan. He was banned from staying in Japan, and fortunately, he was not imprisoned. However, at that point, he was in South Korea and once again found himself in trouble. We hope that justice will be served for Johnny. I know that most foreigners do not share this kind of behavior, but we must admit that such actions greatly damage the image of foreigners in countries like Japan and South Korea. It's no surprise that the governments of these countries put so much effort into managing these situations. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. And if you want to check out exclusive videos about North Korea, click on this video now, and I'll see you there.